My name is Elena. I've always believed that love had rules. Quiet, invisible rules that kept things in order, like whom you're allowed to miss at night, or whose voice you're allowed to dream about. I followed those rules for years. I married young to a man named Caleb, because that's what love was supposed to look like. We were college sweethearts, perfect on paper, and tired of being lonely. But nobody ever tells you that love can disappear without a fight. Not explode, not burn, just fade. Like wallpaper in a sunlit room, so slow and quiet you don't notice until one day you turn and realize it's all pale and lifeless. That's how Caleb and I became strangers with rings on our fingers. It was Robert, his father, who noticed first. Noticed how I lingered in the kitchen longer than I should, how I started staying over during family visits instead of driving home right away. He never asked why. He just offered me warmth, a cup of tea, a knowing glance across the room, and I told myself that was all it was. Kindness. Robert is older, composed in the way that makes you feel steadier just by sitting near him. His hands are lined with stories. His voice has the kind of silence behind it that doesn't rush to fill the air. When we talked, it was never about anything grand, usually about the weather, or a book he'd half finished, or the way the trees outside. The window kept changing before either of us could catch them. And yet, in those ordinary exchanges, I started to feel seen again. Not in the way Caleb used to, not even in the way a lover sees you. Just human. I was Elena again, not a wife, not a disappointment, not a quiet presence in someone else's life. It scared me. The way Robert would remember the smallest details, how I take my coffee, how my voice drops when I'm sad. I'd sit across from him on the back porch, both of us quiet, both of us pretending that this connection was harmless. That it was just a daughter-in-law and a father-in-law who happened to understand each other a little too well. But the truth whispered in between silences. I felt it when his eyes lingered on me a moment too long, when his fingers brushed mine, and neither of us moved away. I felt it in my chest, that thudding warning of something blooming where it shouldn't. I began to dread family dinners, yet needed them. I stopped wearing lipstick, but paid more attention to my hair. Every action, split between guilt and longing, between what I knew was right and what felt like breath in a house where I'd long been suffocating. I didn't fall for Robert in a dramatic collapse. I stepped toward him slowly, half in denial, half aching to be known. And in those steps, I lost the version of myself that once believed love always followed the rules. There are certain silences that don't feel empty. They feel full, heavy, like a room holding its breath. That's how it always felt between me and Robert. We never had long, indulgent conversations. Nothing you'd call emotional confessions. Most of what passed between us wasn't said out loud, and maybe that's what made it so unbearable. Or maybe that's what made it beautiful. Robert was never loud, never the center of attention at the table. He had this stillness, like he knew things others hadn't yet learned to recognize. He watched people. He listened. Not the kind of listening where someone waits for their turn to speak, but the kind that makes you feel like your words have weight, like they land somewhere safe. I first noticed it one afternoon, years after I'd married Caleb. We were all in the living room, pretending everything was fine. Robert and I ended up in the kitchen, alone. I was washing dishes, staring through the window at a leaf caught in the wind, and I said something small about how quiet the house had become lately. He didn't answer right away. He just poured me a glass of water, placed it on the counter beside me, and said, "Some quiet is peaceful, some of it isn't." I never forgot that. Over time, it became a pattern. The way he could respond to what I didn't say. When I'd visit the house, I'd find him sitting on the back steps, looking out into the yard like he was searching for something only he could see. I started sitting beside him, even when I had nothing to say. Especially then. There's an intimacy in silence, if you let it stretch long enough. It wraps around two people and says, "We don't have to explain ourselves here." I could hear the wind move through the trees and know he was listening to it too. I could shift in my seat and feel his gaze soften, though he never turned to look. It was always the small things. The way he handed me a blanket when the night turned cool. The way he waited for me to finish speaking, even if it took me forever to find the words. The way he didn't flinch when I cried in front of him for the first time, didn't try to fix it, just sat there like he was holding space for the ache. There were moments, quiet, suspended moments, where we would lock eyes and neither of us would smile. Not because we were sad, but because we both knew something sacred was happening, and to smile would shatter it. I think some people spend their whole lives trying to be heard, trying to be seen. And I, somehow, was both in the silence between shared cups of coffee and long glances across a hallway. No words, just understanding, just breath. Just us. Most people think that life changes in big moments, grand confessions, explosive arguments, sudden kisses. But for me, it changed in the quiet rhythm of ordinary days. It was in the clinking of ceramic mugs in the early morning when the kitchen still smelled faintly of last night's roast, and the coffee pot sputtered to life with that low, comforting hiss. Robert always woke up early. He liked his toast barely golden, and he never spread the butter to the edges. I used to notice these things without realizing I was noticing them. The house we spent time in was old and wooden, the kind that creaked even when no one was moving. The floors had their own language. I could always tell when it was Robert walking. Down the hallway, his steps were slow, measured with a soft rhythm. Caleb stomped, everyone else shuffled. But Robert. He walked like someone who had already learned there was no need to rush through anything. I remember one winter morning, frost crawling along the edges of the windows. I'd woken early, restless from another night, pretending Caleb and I still spoke like we used to. I wandered downstairs and found Robert already in the living room, wrapped in that same worn gray cardigan he always wore when it was cold. A book sat open on his lap. I don't think he was reading. He was just there, present, holding space, as if waiting for something unnamed. I sat beside him, neither of us saying anything. The room smelled like firewood and cinnamon. Someone had left a candle burning the night before. A clock ticked softly in the corner. Outside, the snow hadn't yet begun to melt. It was all so quiet, so deeply uneventful, and yet I remember every second. There was a kind of tenderness in how he handed me a blanket without speaking, how he shifted slightly to make space for me, though there was already plenty. How our fingers brushed when I reached for the mug he had placed near the armrest, and neither of us pulled away. Evenings were much the same. After dinner, he would sometimes sit at the old piano in the corner, playing just a few notes, never a full song. His hands moved like he was remembering something long forgotten. I'd stay close by, pretending to read a book, but my eyes never really stayed on the page. It was never what we said. It was the smell of his cologne lingering faintly in the hallway. The low hum of his voice when he answered the phone in the pie. Next room. The way he folded his napkins slowly, deliberately, while everyone else rushed to clear their plates. Our story wasn't made of drama. It was built in teaspoons of sugar, in quiet afternoons folding laundry, in shared glances across rooms full of people. It was hidden in plain sight, wrapped inside the fabric of everyday life.